Good morning, everyone, from a wonderful Boulder, Colorado at the Front Range. We are going to be discussing VR and Microsoft Flight Simulator and if it is all the hype that it's caught up to be and what my personal opinion is while I've made the switch from my traditional setup, which I'll post a link up above, with a bunch of peripherals and a nice ultra-wide monitor and all that good stuff, to now just a VR headset and really just the yoke, throttle, and trim wheel as my peripherals. So what does it feel like? What does it have pros and cons to? Because I feel like there's a lot of videos out there that are always just like, oh my gosh, immersion, but nobody mentions the sort of cons to it. So we're just going to go ahead, and it's going to be kind of a talking head video and a little bit of a sort of demonstration here and there of things, but let's just go ahead and hop on into the air and have a look at this beautiful area as we fly around and discuss things a little bit. Now, as we're taking off, if you're not familiar with my channel and this is your first time coming here, I would appreciate you to, if you enjoyed this video, like it and subscribe if you'd like to see more content. It definitely helps me out. Now, as we're making our way down the runway, the first thing that you will notice in VR is that you are much more spatially aware of your sort of surroundings, and I guess that's where that immersion term comes in, which I've kind of not necessarily grown to hate, but I think the term that I want to use a little bit more for VR is sort of like this spatial awareness. And so, like, for example, like I can feel the height of each tree and road, and everything has a depth to it, and it makes it feel that much more real to fly over and position your aircraft in that virtual space. Now, the next thing that I noticed right away was taking me back to the days when I was working towards getting my private pilot's license, and that was that the instructor told me they always knew when someone grew up using flight simulators because they always stared at the gauges versus looked outside the majority of the time. And I immediately felt right away the sense that I could tell when my nose was dipping and or that my attitude was slightly off, or all of that type of stuff. And I'm not looking at the gauges, I'm looking at my surroundings and then glancing at the gauges every once in a while just to confirm what I'm feeling. Now, that would be called flying by the seat of your pants, but really this is the illusion of that, and it does it very, very well. Now we'll move on quickly to discuss the visuals. So by no means is Microsoft Flight Simulator a VR only game. I think everyone knows that. But what that means is that it is not really a plug and play experience when it comes to VR. You definitely need to take your time and tune your settings. Watch some great YouTube videos. I'm not going to bother doing guides and things like that unless people really request them and like the way mine is set up. But everyone's system's different. Everyone's needs are different. I personally like low and slow. And so for me, getting the terrain textures along with, the fauna, the buildings, my level of detail, terrain and detail, I wanted to make those a priority and make sacrifices in other places. The main places I made sacrifices was with shadows and reflections. And you can see I still have decent reflections going on, and the shadows aren't bad. But I wanted crisp dials. I wanted to be able to see things as best as I could. And really what that means is getting away with as low as a frame rate as I feel is acceptable for the visuals that I'm getting. And I think we all know that balance at this point now of what it's like to be like, oh, I want to push that higher and I can't. Now, what that means for your personal setup, I can't tell you what you're going to get. What I can tell you is my setup, and I'll post a link up above for that or in the description. I don't remember if I said I was already going to post one above or not. But anyways, is a AMD setup with a 5800X3D and a 6800 XT graphics card on 32 gigs of RAM and just gonna bring back our RPMs to cruise here a little bit. All installed on an NVMe SSD. So at this point, generation old and really kind of a mid level PC at this point. But I took my time to really tune my settings to get them where I want them to be. So I would say that is con number one, is that if you go into VR thinking that, hey, I'm getting 60 frames per second at 1080p with, high settings, guess what? You are not going to get anywhere close to that on VR. VR, think about it as you almost have two 4K monitors strapped to your face, and they're doing a lot more algorithmic processing to make this happen. So get your expectations in an area where I'm not going to get the same visuals and frame rates that I was on a 2D monitor. It's just not possible. It doesn't equate. I think some people mention that, but it's a little bit more pronounced than you might think. Even if you have, current gen stuff and you're like, oh yeah, I've got a 4080 and I'm all set, good to go. You're still going to need to dial things back a little bit compared to what you think you're going to be able to get out of it. I'm going to go ahead and pop us over onto autopilot here real quick. And where did my mouse go? There it is. Sorry guys, my mouse was on a different screen there. All right, so autopilot on. And let's get our heading bug set while we're at it. And this is going to lead me into about something that I think hardly ever gets mentioned, and that is the aircraft that you're flying and how well it is optimized for... How did I hit altitude? There we are. Okay. So how well it is optimized for VR. And what I mean by that, I'm going to try and sum this up quickly, is think of a developer identifying the 3D space of your cockpit from everywhere from like this little hump to the entire surface area of your panel here, and then where the actual 3D elements are, so where each sort of knob and button is. Now, if they don't go through and take the time to actually map that out, what ends up happening is that the mouse goes into like a different plane, a different field, and it causes double vision. So, for example, if I start to move my mouse up and then boom, you can tell now that it is sort of outside the aircraft on this almost like arc. It's not right on the windshield. It's sort of out, I don't know, just beyond it, on the nose a little bit. Same thing as we come around, you can tell that it is staying in that plane. But once we come back into the cockpit, it is very evident that we are in the cockpit and that the mouse is, you can see it switching angles and positions to what it's facing on. Now, if a developer doesn't take the time to do that, it will be like the mouse is outside the aircraft except for when you go over a 3D element. And what happens is that your eyes are focused on the 3D element, so like this knob, for example, but your eyes think that the mouse is actually outside the aircraft in a nondescript space, and your brain is going to double them, because we have two screens. We have a left and a right screen, and your brain can't comprehend where that something that should be in the same plane as this knob, and it's not. It gets confused, and your eyes are gonna separate the right and left vision. Now, best way to demonstrate that is kind of by taking your finger and, you know, moving it closer and closer to your face, and as it gets closer and closer, you get to a point where it's going to double, or you're going to focus so hard on your finger that everything behind it becomes double or blurry. That's what happens with an aircraft that is not very optimized, and it is very annoying. So for example, one of my favorite aircrafts is made by FlySimware, which is the Cessna 414, and he's done a good job of mapping certain areas of the cockpit, but other areas aren't, you know, there. So then all of a sudden the mouse feels like it just goes through this invisible wall, and it turns into a very jarring and sort of, you know, it removes you from that space that you're sitting in, because all of a sudden your brain is going, hold on, I felt like I was sitting in the cockpit, and now all of a sudden I don't know where I am, and my eyes are playing tricks on me. Speaking of eyes playing tricks on you, that's going to be down to, some people do get motion sickness with VR, especially with Flight Simulator, and the reason being is a lot of VR games, you're moving, right? And the world is moving with your motion. In Flight Simulator, you are stationary in a moving object. So I think it's a little bit more prone to people feeling that motion sickness, because your eyes are telling your brain one thing, and it's not having the forces applied to it. So for example, let me come out of autopilot here. If I was to do very quick transitions and banks and really starting to look around while I'm doing those, it is very harsh sometimes to people to actually experience that, because their brain is telling them, we should have felt a sudden surge, and that did not happen. So our eyes and our sort of motion and forces are not adding up to what's to be expected. So if that happens to you, I suggest you know, doing more of a low, slow flight, get used to it, and really allow your brain to be comfortable with what VR does to you. It just going back to how wonderful of an experience it is, though, just looking outside and looking at different areas, even at this altitude, we're roughly about, I don't know, 2,000 feet above ground right now. I can still feel the depth and the curves of these slopes, and the shadows make more sense, and everything just feels a lot more complete and real. Now, as far as, you know, interacting with everything, we kind of went over the buttons and the knobs and the planes and the fields and all of that good stuff. Now, as far as working with, like, doing a flight plan, for example, nice thing with VR and Flight Simulator is that you can keybind a sort of VR focus button. So my gauges are nice and clear. I would be able to flight plan no problem from where I'm at here. But sometimes you want to get in nice and close and make sure that you're being accurate, maybe get a little bit more detail, especially on smaller screens like this. So you have a VR focus button where wherever I look, I push it and I can hold it down. So I just have it as a little toggle switch on my yoke, and I have better control and accuracy over doing what I want to in oops in here. So you know, it's very easy to go through and actually pop in things. Now, the one downside is that we no longer have access to the nice working title keyboard. There might be a way to have a little virtual keyboard come up, but you know, I personally, I don't mind turning the knobs here, and then you just hit enter and, you know, pop it in there. And if we wanted to say, yeah, let's go up to, okay, we'll put in just a quick little flight plan to, actually, yeah, let's do this one. See, there we go, enter, and there we go. You can see it popped it in. So very easy to do. It's nice that they have that focus function on there. Same again, like our altimeter has just been set for 2000 for some reason, so we can come in really quickly, change it over. Now, as far as like ATC windows and such, let me swap tanks real quick here. There we go. As far as ATC goes, there is a went too far there. Let's we might as well turn over this way. Oh, check out the wind turbines here. Same again, just those I can feel the height of those coming off of the ground. It's very, very cool to have that experience. Yeah, as far as ATC and other windows that you might need to interact with, it's very cool what you can do. So for example, I have a keybind just to bring up the ATC window, and you can see it's just popped it up in the center view, but I can move this in 3D space to wherever I want. So if I want it to be, say, like here, I can just leave that there, and anytime I need to look at my ATC window, I just turn over and I look at it. Also, I can just close it, and anytime I hit my keybind, it pops it back up in the same spot. Now, there's a lot of different overlay programs so that you can even overlay desktops in here, stuff like that. Keep in mind that those do use up resources, so all of that comes at as a trade-off. So, but it's very cool that you're able to get all of that set up the way you want to. And, you know, like I have a keybind again to bring up, you know, your little window up here. So if you wanted to bring up your weather menu, you know, there you go. And same again, you can move that wherever you want in the world. I mean, I can throw it in the back seat if I wanted to, you know. So it is very cool how that works. We'll go ahead and close that back down again. You know, there is, like I said, a lot of pros. The cons being your system needs to be good to have a good experience, or you're going to need to understand that you're going to have to scale things down in order to get the frame rates that you want. We're getting between 40 and 45 is the way I've got mine set up right now. Scaling is at I think I have 85 or 90% scaling done, so you know, it helps a little bit, but you can see everything is nice, crisp, and clear as far as my gauges go. What you're seeing is what I'm seeing. I'm taking a direct recording of basically my left eye. So that's kind of what you're seeing in order to make it a 2D image. Very, very cool. I'll skip ahead. I'm going to do a landing into Boulder here, and I'll just jump ahead once we're about to touch down on final, just so you guys can watch what that looks like. There's one other thing that I want to talk about once we get touched down about object level of detail. So we'll just fly over there and we'll touch base in a minute. Alrighty, so we're kind of coming in here, coming in a little hot, but that's okay. And the one thing I wanted to mention about draw distances, well, object level detail, is that the numbers don't equate to the same representation in 2D versus VR. And what I mean by that is that there's a couple of different elements at play here. Number one being that you can see that now that windsock came into view versus that would have been a little bit sooner. Just gonna try and come down the runway a little further because I want to get off at the exit down here towards the end more. I'll bring those flaps up. So aircraft, for example, is there another? Yeah, I think there's one more exit. We can see some over off to our side, and the ones that have retractable landing gear are just floating. Now, there's two things that are going on for me with that. So you can see this guy, the yellow guy there, has no landing. There's the wheels, but still no undercarriage showed up there. Like, so it's strange because one, the level of detail you would think is not correct for what your setting is, and the other thing that is more noticeable in VR is the same thing. Like, see these cars off in the distance, they're just sort of like blocks right now, and that one just populated in. The landing gear just came on for that one. Let's see, so those are starting to render in now. I'm noticing it more just because the screens are so close to my face. Where really that on my monitor is very, very tiny, and I wouldn't have even picked it up. But because I'm so close to the screen, it becomes more apparent. And that's that sort of same again, that sort of like spatial awareness where it's like, oh, okay, I know how far away I am from that aircraft, and you know everything else, but because the screens are so high resolution, you feel that you should be able to see them better, where really it's a very small portion of my screen. So that's another thing that's taken me a little bit to get used to, especially things like the windsock and stuff like that, where it's like, oh, it just jumped into place when really it's a very small portion of my overall screen, but it's a little bit more jarring because it is, you know, the screen, it's like being so close to your monitor, if you will. So that's sort of, you know, talking head overview, fun flight, whatever you want to call it, but I hope you enjoyed. I'm just going to upload this, and you guys, please leave comments down below about your own experiences. If you have questions about anything in particular that I might have skipped over, please let me know. I love to hear from you. Until next time, thanks for watching and take care.